Hi everyone, give me just a minute. I'm going to get my screen up here and we'll get started. To be a little less distracting, I'm going to turn off my video so that I'm not seeing my face during the presentation. Thank you so much for coming to our monthly Wild Ones of Southeastern PA chapter meeting. I hope you all had a lovely holiday season. Since the kickoff meeting last month, we've gotten a lot of interest, and we've gained enough paid members to charter. Yay! We have also had a treasurer step up and a member chair, so we have all of our board members in place. We have a YouTube channel where all of the meeting recordings will be found, and a Facebook page where educational content and events will be posted. We're just getting started, so bear with us as we add content to all of those outlets. This is what our YouTube channel looks like and our Facebook page currently. I'm really excited by all the great ideas that have already been generated. People have reached out to give ideas about spreading the word to our friends and neighbors, to HOAs, and to the general public that just aren't aware of the need to choose natives. This month, I will be giving the presentation, but don't worry, for the next several months, we have excellent guest speakers to provide some great education. Plants are my passion. They are not my profession. So everything presented today, I've learned from reading books, obsessively researching native plants, and studying plant lists from nurseries for fun. I also volunteer with a lot of great organizations like Natural Lands and Perkium and Watershed, and get to talk to very knowledgeable people about plants and insects while clearing invasives and tending seedlings. We are losing insects, birds, and other native animals at an alarming rate. Our highly industrialized agricultural system, with its reliance on an overuse of chemicals, human overpopulation, and subsequent deforestation for housing needs, and ever-diminishing open spaces are all contributing factors. We as homeowners have a responsibility to be stewards of the earth, improving our biodiversity by planting native plants. We want our non-native honeybees and all of our native pollinators to thrive in our environment, which will only flourish with native plants. If I can do this, you can too. Anyone can put in a little time and a little work to plant these beautiful plants and reap the rewards of seeing so many beautiful insects. Take joy in the fact that you can bring life to your little piece of earth with just a few changes to how you see the world. There are three main areas we will cover today: what native plants are, how to choose the best plants for your needs, and some simple things you can do to get started. At the end, there are several pages of resources for more information and a list of nurseries in the area for you to go find these great plants. There are many definitions for the word native, but I prefer the definition developed by Doug Tallamy because it is the most specific and encompassing. It says a plant or animal that has evolved in a given place over a period of time sufficient to develop complex and essential relationships with the physical environment and other organisms in a given ecological community. It's about the relationships of the plants with the animals that makes something native. There are lots of reasons to choose native, summed up on this slide, but the best reason is that for all of the life it provides. It wants to be here, it doesn't need a lot of input, but what you get out of it is so great. Native plants serve as host plants. Most butterflies and moths, caterpillars, or larvae can only eat one or maybe a couple kinds of plant. If those plants aren't available in the landscape, you won't have those butterflies or moths. They also provide food for birds, nesting sites, shelter, pollen and nectar. For host plants, if you want monarch caterpillars, you plant milkweed. If you want fritillary caterpillars, you plant violets. More monarchs, more fritillaries. My very favorite, the cutest caterpillar you'll ever see, the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. I planted this bush. 3 weeks later, I had this caterpillar. I was so excited. As opposed to native plants, non-native plants just do not serve as many ecological functions. For example, the non-native kudzu will host the native silver-spotted skipper butterfly. One butterfly this plant will host. However, the native oak tree that the kudzu displaces would have hosted 454 species of caterpillar. At the same time, the kudzu that also displaces the black cherry is a host for 324 caterpillars, and the willow is a host for 247 caterpillars, the hickory for 229, and the maple for 223. That information is from the National Wildlife Foundation. That is a total of 1,477 species just between those 5 native plants that are being lost when the kudzu takes over. For more facts and information like that, and just the devastating effect of non-native plants that are invasive, you can check out Doug Tallamy's book, Nature's Best Hope. Think of the wildlife you're looking to attract when deciding what plants to include in your landscape. Do you want to focus on all pollinators or butterflies specifically? How about birds? Maybe you want to see more small mammals on a large property. Think about the things you want to see and plant the plants that will bring them there. Plant it and they will come. Pollen and nectar sources are important if you want to provide for pollinators. Providing blooms from early spring until late fall is a key to helping lots of species live and reproduce. This is the biggest bee I've ever seen in my yard, and it was amazing. Looking for the secret lives being lived in my garden is my favorite thing to do. Signs of leafcutter bees, native mantis synthecas, and wheelbug egg masses make me so happy. Native plants provide all of these insects the things they need to survive. And I don't have to pay a fancy fee to get into some arboretum or a zoo or anything. I can walk out my back door and see these amazing things and essentially just wander around all day and be very happy. If you want to really make a difference in the ecological value of your landscape, choose native plants that serve as host plants for butterflies and moths. The variegated prominent moth caterpillar on black cherry tree blends right into the nibbled leaf edge. I didn't even realize I was looking at a caterpillar at first. The swallowtail on fennel in my garden, right here. Spicebush swallowtail on the spicebush. This guy's about to go pupate. And then this wasp right here flew away with this blueberry just a split second after I took this picture. It was so cool. Once you know your overall goal, there are lots of things to take into consideration. Observation, planning, and appropriate preparation are keys to a successful project. You have to consider growing conditions in the area that you're working with, how you're going to prepare the site, and trying to provide for all seasons of bloom. If you observe your property during several seasons to determine the growing conditions, you'll have better success. Soil moisture can change dependent on season and slope of the land, and the amount of sun and area will get changes during the day and throughout the year. So knowing the land that you want to work with will help you determine what the best plants are to put there, because native plants want to be in their right place. If you get the right plant for the right place, you will have success. There are native plants for all growing conditions, from full sun to full shade, from wet to dry soil. You have a small space, choose natives that stay small. You have a large area you'd like to fill on the cheap, select some aggressive spreaders and get more bang for your buck. The smaller the plant is when you purchase it and plant it, the cheaper it will be and the better success it will have. If you get aggressive spreaders, that means you'll have more plants in the future that you can spread out and fill an area. The bumblebees in this pink turtle head are so great to watch. They're strong and they pry open these closed blooms and wiggle in there and get some pollen or nectar and then come back out. It's an entertaining way to spend an afternoon. Proper site preparation is the difference between a successful, productive native plant habitat and an unsuccessful, time-consuming, and more expensive weed bed. Eliminating competition is the main goal for site preparation. Decide when you want to plant your seeds and start your site prep accordingly. Solarization uses the heat from the sun and black plastic to kill any growing vegetation. This is a decent way to convert a turf lawn into a native planting. The smother method uses, like it sounds, layers of cardboard or mulch to smother the existing growing plants. Sod cutting gets you immediate gratification, but it is hard work. And tilling is not especially recommended because you're disturbing the soil and you're bringing weed seeds to the surface. But if you follow the recommendations, it can be an effective way to site prep. This is just an example of site preparation for the goal of fall seed sowing, which is the ideal time to sow most native herbaceous plant seeds because they need at least one cycle of cold, moist stratification, a freeze-thaw cycle. So they're out there getting rained on, they're getting snowed on. They are warming up on those 50-degree December days that we have, and that breaks down their seed coat and allows them to germinate. So here is an example of solarization that I did in a part of my yard that it was just turf grass. I covered with plastic. I made, here you can see, I called them earth divots to hold down the plastic. You want to seal the edges so that the heat increases and the air circulation decreases so the temperature stays up. And then I secured it with rocks and wood. I started this project at the end of May of 2020 for a scheduled fall planting. I could have started earlier in May. We do get warm enough days in the beginning of May even, but I started this in the end of May. Then in July, I removed the plastic. You can see the difference. Everything was brown and dried out and dead. I raked away the biodebris. I left it open to the air for 2 weeks, and that allows any seeds that are still viable in the soil to try and germinate again in those 2 weeks and start growing, because you're trying to exhaust that weed seed bank. This is a similar project. It's just on a bigger scale, and it is in one of my township parks that I am trying to effect some change in. This picture was taken on July 1st, so we did start it later in the summer. And as you can see, the picture on the right shows that the soil is so compacted, they can't even get a shovel in it. So it was a challenge to try and hold down the plastic, but we just ended up sealing the edges with wood, and we went that way. When we pulled back the black plastic for 2 weeks, you can see the difference. That solarization really does work. It kills off that existing growth. Now, there are some objections to this type of method because it may have an effect on the organisms that are living in the soil. So there's always a pros and cons with any technique you're going to use. Another method that I have used is just to, by hand, remove the turf grass. It's hard work, but I could plant immediately. That wheelbarrow full of sod is so heavy, so heavy. A sod cutter is way easier, but pieces of sod are really heavy, so you just have to see what's at your disposal. 6 weeks later, and already this looks like an entirely different place. So that was it feels almost like instant gratification. It's amazing. And instead of being useless turf grass, now there are host plants and just ecosystem value right there. Another eco-friendly method, I spread chicken scratch feed on this site every day for about 3 weeks, and I let my chickens come, scratch and peck, and dig in the grass for the seeds until there was no grass left. They dug it all up. The great thing was they left the violets that were growing in there too, so they like scratched around them and didn't eat them. So that was really exciting. And then I could plant right into that bed. I planted some viburnum, some small little plugs, and this was the following spring. It's really hard to appreciate from this photo, but the texture of the tall grasses is so lovely. Nothing's in bloom in this picture because this bed was created to fill the dearth months of July and August. But here's the bed in late July. The viburnum had already bloomed in April and May and set berries, so you can see the berries in this picture a little bit. And then the same bed, it was blooming in July and August, and here it's still going in September with the black-eyed Susans and asters and mist flower. It's just, instead of just being turf grass, I have all seasons of amazing beauty in this bed. All because I let my chickens scratch the ground and put some plants there. Remember to plan for all seasons of bloom from February to October. And if you can provide at least 3 different flowering plants in each season, and by different flowering plants, I mean they have a different shape, they have a different height maybe, they have different texture, because the different insects that need to come and pollinate them are attracted and are physically able to get into different kinds of plants, different kinds of flowers. So if you can provide 3 different flowering plants, that provides for the ability of more insects to pollinate. Creating layers also adds to your ecological value, and I mean covering the ground instead of with mulch, pack it densely with ground plants. Then do a shrub layer, then understory trees that usually stay under 25 feet, and then canopy trees. Those are your oaks, your maples, your bigger trees. This is a great example that I borrowed from this Healthy Edges website of layers. Having functional layers in your plantings, many species working together to grow intertwined roots and improve stability and water absorption to the area. Be patient. Remember, smaller plants are cheaper and they transplant better than larger, more established plants because their roots are smaller, because they go through less transplant shock, because they need less water because they're smaller. In that first year, you're not going to see much happen. You're not going to see much growth. The second year, you're going to see a little bit. You're going to notice a little bit. But that third year, they are just going to start going crazy because they're happy where they're at. They want to be there, and now they are settled in, they're comfortable, and they're just going to grow and grow and really be great for you. If I had to tell everyone one plant to put in their yard, it would be mountain mint, because you will see more diversity of insect visitors than on any other plant. And it is a long bloomer and it spreads nicely, but not crazily, just nicely. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful plant. Sometimes it's really difficult to find the straight native species, especially if you're not sure what to look for. But anything with a fancy name, like purple coneflower, is Echinacea purpurea. That's its straight species name. But if after that you see a fancy name with single quotation or single quotation marks, like the hybrid avalanche, it tells you that it is not the straight species. The first letter of a cultivar, which is a cultivated plant, is capitalized, and the term is never italicized. Cultivars are also surrounded by single quotation marks or preceded by the abbreviation CV. So in this example, the redbud, Cerces canadensis, is a cultivar, the forest pansy. Because they are cultivated and they are selected for specific characteristics and manipulated for those characteristics, they may not serve as host plants. Not all cultivars are bad, but if you're changing the leaf color or if you're changing the flower structure, you may be eliminating that availability to the plants that need it, to the insects that need those things. If you're changing the bloom time, then the insects that rely on the plant to bloom at a certain time may miss that window. So they may just not be as functional as they could be if you got the straight species. Do you want to attract native bees or butterflies? Are you more excited about birds? Are you looking to mitigate rainwater in a depressed area of your yard? Are you looking to provide shelter or shade for a certain area? Pick plants that get you what you want. This area in this picture will eventually provide shade for picnicking. It was planted in the summer of 2019, so I am anticipating this summer that it will be a little more mature and start providing some shade, but in a couple more years, this is going to be a lovely picnic spot. My disclaimer is, in this whole presentation, these 3 pictures are the only ones I had to borrow from Google. Design is definitely my weakest link. I'm reading several books about design, and I'm taking the ecological landscape design classes at Mount Cuba Center to get better at it. But I know from what I've learned so far, it's best to plant in drifts of the same plant instead of mixing one of each. Having the same plant in an area of at least 3 feet by 3 feet makes it more energy efficient for most nectar and pollen collectors who practice plant fidelity, meaning they visit the same type of plant for their whole foraging trip. There are great resources out there, though, for people like me who don't know a lot about design. This website at dcnr.pa.gov has a map like this with a list of plants for every growing condition you can think of. And if you know about the plants, you can substitute what would work in each of these different areas, but this at least gives you a layout idea. If you're familiar with Prairie Nursery, they also have these great maps that you can use, and you can actually order their plants from this package deal. They will send you the map and you can plant them. It's almost like a Lego kit that you put together for your garden. Talking about rainwater, when you're designing a garden, think about the function. This area on the left always receives excessive water during heavy rain. To mitigate that, I chose native plants that prefer moist soil. Their long roots absorb water, filter, and keep it from running off into the street. So in August 2019, this was after a storm, and I had put in this bed. So then it went through a winter, and in March of 2020, I decided I was going to add more plants. In just a few months later, in June, this was what it looked like. It's beautiful, vibrant. Birds love it. It's always covered in pollinators. And then through summer, it's blooming, it's beautiful. Joe Pye weed again. If you've noticed, I love Joe Pye. Love it, love it. And I use leaf mulch to add nutrients back in, to protect the soil. Then I decided, well, it's not enough. I want more plants. So I decided to, in this first picture, I had added a bed of umbrella magnolia, buttonbush, and hoary mountain mint parallel to that first rain garden. And then I wanted to combine the two. My whole goal is to get rid of all of my turf grass except for walking paths. So this is the way I do it. I just piecemeal everything in, and it's definitely less overwhelming that way, because I just work on little projects here and there, and then I connect them, and they just end up getting bigger and bigger. I put down the cardboard between the two beds, and I planned where my shrubs would be. That's in the second picture here. I ordered flats of plugs from North Creek Nursery with some friends, and then I cut through the cardboard to plant them. So I was using the cardboard as a temporary mulch, and because I didn't remove any turf, I'm using that smothering method that we talked about. And then I covered the area with mulched leaves that I had collected and rescued from my neighbors who were just going to throw them out in the trash. I secured the edges, and in the spring, I do plan to kind of round out these edges to make mowing better. But this is where I left it in November. I'm excited to see what happens in January, or in spring, sorry. This is another area of my yard. I do not live in a lake, but after a big storm, this is what it looked like, and I wanted to make that better. So I didn't do any site prep on this one, mostly because when I get big rains, sometimes it does look like that. So I planted plugs and bare root trees, shrubs, and some small established shrubs and trees directly into the turf. I didn't prep the area. I mounded the sod that I had removed from making the holes to try and keep the mulch and the soil from washing away when we did get a storm. There is black chokeberry, witch hazel, arrowwood viburnum, spicebush, river birch, Joe Pye weed, mist flower, cardinal flower, white turtlehead, blue iris, blue-eyed grass, seed box, and several others that are in this planting. That was in April, and this was in September. It's just glorious. Like, I just love it so much. It's so fun to go out there and see what's happening. The lighting in this picture is terrible because the bed's to the west of my property, but in July and August, to the right side of this, it's just brilliant with 4 different bee balms. In this bed, smartweed had seeded itself among the intentional plantings, and I allowed it to stay as a placeholder until early October. And then I pulled it so that the seeds from the intentional plantings could fall to the bare soil in the autumn and winter. Here's that bee balm. Gosh, I miss summer. Can't wait for it to come back. So, starting simple. I know it seems overwhelming when you think about tackling your entire lawn, or if you want to change the rules of your HOA. Starting simple with one small project or step at a time will make it more manageable for both your time and your money. Add a new wildflower bed each season, or add a hedgerow of native shrubs. You don't have to convert your whole yard, but evaluate what areas of turf you actually use for foot traffic, kids play, dogs, etc., and slowly turn the rest of the areas into native plantings. We have to shrink the lawn. It's the only way forward. It's the largest monocrop we grow, and we don't even eat it. I saw a meme on Facebook that showed a man in an old colonial clothing standing on a manicured lawn, and it said, "We don't dress like this anymore. Why do we landscape like this?" Change how you see your yard. See the beauty in providing life to so many other creatures when you convert your lawn into a living landscape. Why fight nature when you can harmonize with it? Most butterflies and moths overwinter in the landscape as an egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, or adult, using leaf litter for winter cover. Great spangled fritillary and woolly bear caterpillars tuck themselves into a pile of leaves for protection from cold weather and predators. Red-banded hair streaks lay their eggs on fallen oak leaves, which become the first food of the caterpillars when they emerge. Luna moths and swallowtail butterflies disguise their cocoons and chrysalis as dried leaves, blending in with the real leaves. Mated queen bumblebees burrow only an inch or 2 into the earth to hibernate for winter. An extra thick layer of leaves is welcome protection from the elements. There are many such examples if you check out the xerces.org website. But leaving the leaves, they're not going to steal your wine. They're just going to provide free compost to nourish your soil and help the little critters of the earth. This picture is in late March when the peach and cherry trees are just starting to bloom, just after I did the chop and drop method of cleaning up the remaining stems from last winter. I recently read an article saying that even when you wait until spring to clean up, you should still leave your stems at about 12 inches because some research is coming out that native bees that overwinter in stems tend to use, I guess it would be 1-year-old stems instead of just the stems from that same season. So that is something I will change with my practice coming this spring, that I will leave 12 inches of stem standing even from old growth. And to show you that leaving them all winter and cutting them down in the spring didn't do any damage, this is that same bed in early May when the fruit trees have already bloomed. They've leafed out now. The ground ivy and henbit are blooming. They are not native. I totally get that. But they are providing nectar and pollen sources, and until I have something better to plant and replace them with, I'm going to let them do their ground cover thing. That same bed in July, full of life, and a whole group of coneflowers is behind this bed that you can't quite see. So there's a beautiful coneflower picture for you. We talked about leaving the old growth until April. It harbors life. Many native bees use hollow stems to overwinter. Leaving that old growth until the weather warms enough for these species to awaken will help increase pollinator populations. And many bird species that are returning from their winter migration, they like to eat the standing seed heads for much needed sustenance. They're hungry. They've flown a long way. Here's another example of a bed that, this is the bed of mountain mint that I was talking about. Doesn't get taken down until I'm seeing bumblebees fly. And because I leave the leaves and the stems, I get to see these great fun things. On the left, this picture here is a chrysalis of a variegated fritillary. And on the right, I'm not sure, I think it might be a swallowtail. It is on a sassafras tree, so maybe. I'm not sure what it is, though. I will see if I get to see it emerge in spring. Some other fun examples. I can spend hours just in my yard looking for these fun things, but on the left you see this is a native praying mantis mutheka. It's on my raspberry canes. And then on the right, my elderberries are still standing. So there are holes from overwintered insects, and then probably the ripped open holes from birds getting to those insects trying to hide. And they get to make it through winter because they get to eat. Leaving all the old growth doesn't hinder new growth at all. This is that same mountain mint bed in May, and then in July, and you can see the whites of the mountain mint right here just getting ready. They're going to be blooming, and then once they start blooming, they go all the way till October, and I get to see these cool insects on them all the time. This is in August. Mountain mint is covered with so many pollinators, it almost gives you vertigo to watch them because it sways like the sea. I have lots of signs in my yard for my neighbors to know that I'm not crazy, that I have intention and purpose in not mowing my grass, in planting all of these wild looking plants. It helps them, and I am hoping that it inspires them. If they see the life that's there, they may make some changes too. I am proud to say that I only mowed my yard 7 times in all of 2020. I went about a month mostly between mowings, and then I would just mow the paths or mow the areas that we used, and I think it really helped increase my pollinators. Weeds are friends, if you ask me. The word weed has gotten a bad connotation, but I love many weeds. They want to grow there, they're happy, they want to provide life. As long as they're not taking over something that is of more benefit, I usually let them stand. Fleabane and violets are native, what we would call weeds, because they grow there and they want to be there. We didn't have to do anything to ask them to be there. These others, again, you can decide. In some beds they might be beneficial. They might just be holding a spot that you don't have anything else for yet. But you can pull them out when you have a more beneficial native plant that will grow there, because these are not native. I'm notorious for letting plants grow when they show up in surprise places because I'm not sure what they are and I want to see what they are. These two, the boneset and the goldenrod, I was so happy I let grow because they provided so much great nectar and pollen to lots of late season insects that were trying to get ready for winter. Doug Tallamy helped the National Wildlife Federation develop a great resource to find plants native to your zip code. So you go to this native plant finder website, put in your zip code, and it will pull up the top 10 species, the top 10 plants that provide the most resources to species in your area, and then if you click on the species, it will tell you even more information. And you can use the Penn State Extension website to find host plants for butterflies. Another simple thing you can do is replace non-native plants when you can. You don't have to pull them all out, but if you prioritize, especially if they are invasive, get those out first, but replacing them with natives is key. For example, before I knew better, and I only shopped for plants at big box stores like Lowe's and Home Depot, I got these plants on clearance and I thought I was getting a bargain. I didn't know at the time that they are invasive and they don't contribute in any real way to the ecosystem. So even though I love that they provide shelter and they provide shade and they provide privacy for my chickens and my duck, I needed to do something about them because they are not native. So I did this in the fall. I replaced the Liriope and the Japanese Spirea with a native Spirea and Tiarella cordifolia. And it'll take a couple years for them to provide that same amount of privacy for the chickens and ducks. But now I don't have to worry about contributing to the invasive Spirea spreading off of my property. And I look forward to seeing the new growth come. And I just needed to share this beautiful sassafras because she looks so lovely in the fall. Just a couple tips to help you save money because I know plants are expensive, but you could always try and grow from seed. Winter seed sowing is one of my favorite things to do. I love it. You just collect native seeds, or you can purchase them. Toadshade Wildflower Farm sells seeds out of New Jersey. Prairie Moon and Prairie Nursery are both resources in the Midwest. If you can, collect from local ecotypes, or again, New Jersey's closer than the Midwest, so maybe try and get seeds from there. But you essentially put them in seed starting mix, put them outside, let them get snowed on, let them get rained on, and wait for germination in the spring. And then transplant to the places you're trying to increase your plant diversity in. You can also start seeds indoors, those that don't need to be stratified. We just recently started some mountain mint and coneflower and a couple different kinds of asters and seed box. And then you can transplant them out in the spring. You can also direct sow bee balms and sage and asters in the spring because they don't need to be stratified. This is a great website for instructions on how to winter seed sow and winter seed starting. But I just recently started my winter seed sowing for the year. I used organic seed starting mix. There's some discussion about the sustainability of seed starting mix because it's mostly peat. So a better alternative would be a coconut coir based mix. I will strive to do that in the future to try and improve my sustainability. But I sowed 25 of each of Wingstem, Purple Avens, both from Toadshade Wildflower Farm. I heavily misted the top and put them outside, covered with chicken wire to keep the birds and the squirrels out of them. And you can see in the bottom right picture, right here, in this milk jug, that was a way you can do it also, turning milk jugs into essentially little mini greenhouses to do your winter seed starting. That was columbine that I did it might be 3 years ago now, that I've just never gotten in the ground, and it's still just hanging out in this milk jug, just surviving, just living on. I recommend using a pencil or a garden marker to label each pot, because the snow and the wind and the rain and the sun and the snow again wash off even Sharpie markers. Last year, I had planted 24 types of native seeds that I collected from my own yard in October. I put them in the garden in January, and I didn't do anything. This is how they looked from January on. And at the end of June, this is what it looked like. These senna were ready to be up-potted, and some of them went directly in the ground. And in fact, with senna, because they really don't like their roots to be disturbed, the ones that went directly in the ground did a lot better than the ones that I up-potted. And this is the bed that I had desodded by hand at the end of June, and I planted these winter seed sown senna, and they were just this beautiful yellow color in October. The downy wood mint is also in here. That was grown from seed by a friend. The pagoda dogwood on the right doubled in size. This bed just in 4 months doubled in size. So amazing. This is just an example of starting seeds inside, and then I am fortunate enough to have a very small greenhouse that I can do my hardening off. There's nothing better you can do to help save the bees than to plant native flowers and trees. Just some resources that I like to share, some books on natives, and some more books on natives. I highly recommend, if you've never read Sarah Stein, Noah's Garden, so beautifully written and saying lots of the same things that Doug Tallamy says. She just said it sooner and didn't have all of the hard facts to back it up, but her observations were spot on. My favorite quote of any book on natives and ecosystem, I think I read it at our first meeting, so I'm not going to read it again, but if I could get it tattooed, I think I probably would. Some nurseries. The nurseries in all green, the highlighted green, are native only. Those that are not highlighted green carry natives, but they also carry non-natives, so you just have to watch out for that. Some upcoming opportunities that are available. This Wild Ones is co-sponsoring a national webinar series in conjunction with New Directions in American Landscape. That's NDAL. There's several great interactive webinars featuring a renowned group of instructors, including Larry Weiner, who's the founder of New Directions in American Landscape. You can visit that website and register for any webinars you're interested in. This is a free landscape speaker series. Doug Tallamy presented already. There is another one coming up shortly, and then 2 more at the end of January and the beginning of February. Mount Cuba Center is always an amazing place to take classes. They're doing both in-person classes and online classes, but the gardens don't open until April 1st. This Ecological Landscape Design Symposium probably has an amazing amount of education to provide. Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve has a winter lecture series to check out. Ecolandscaping.org is a membership-based organization, and they have fabulous educational opportunities that with membership you get access to a lot of them, and then they have discounts on other larger presentations. Our next month's meeting will feature Beth Myers, conservationist at the Perkiomen Watershed Conservancy. She has been a conservationist at Perkiomen Watershed since 2017. She graduated from Ursinus College in 2017 with a degree in environmental studies. Her presentation will cover general native plant information, such as what are native plants, how do they differ from invasive and non-native species, how do native plants benefit our local environment, native plant uses for the homeowner, and information about the Perkiomen Watershed Conservancy's Native Plant Project. The spring native plant sale that PWC puts on is the best in the area, and even with COVID this year, they did an amazing job at providing contactless pickup, and it was just a great sale. In March, we're going to have Samantha Nestry, the horticulturist from Stone Lee with Natural Lands, to talk to us about native plant and insect relationships. If you have not become a member yet, think about it. Please become a member, because joining our chapter means that you can be a part of the change that we want to try to create in our natural world. A household yearly membership is as low as $40, and once we're chartered, which is happening, we're in the process of chartering, part of the yearly membership fees returns back to this chapter so that we can use that for programming and events and opportunities. That's me. This is our website, or I'm sorry, our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. We don't have a website quite yet, but if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm so thankful that you joined me, and I look forward to seeing you again next month, hopefully. Thanks, everybody. See you later.